this process of, based on the whole view of karma and the idea that our mind is very dynamic and that nothing, we're not set in stone. And also, so it's called the purification practice. And really the logic is, given that everything we think and do and say programs our mind, well, either we can program our mind with negativity or positivity. So purification is just a process of kind of, and it's a meditation practice we do. And as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do it every day, given that everything we think and do and say programs us. And given that we're not highly realized yet, our mind's going to be pretty dumb and, and do negative things. So we can clean it up every day. We do it's like you do your weeding at the end of the day, It's like that. Purification is like pulling out the weeds, So it's kind of 4 steps. It's like all of this is a psychological process. So it's like 4 steps to it. Again, just remind us, given this Buddhist approach, we've got states of mind that are neurotic, deluded, negative, unhappy, I-based, fear-based, and then the actions we do on the basis of those, they're the troublemakers. They cause us suffering now and in the future, and on the basis of this, we harm others. And then we have actions we do on the basis of virtuous states of mind, and they program us in positive tendencies and bring happiness. It almost seems too simple in a way that negativity produces suffering and positivity produces happiness. Not just now, but the process. Like seeds produce fruits. A weed seed will produce a weed and a flower seed will produce a flower. Sort of like that, In the garden, there are things we can pull out and things we grow. That's a nice analogy. So the Buddhist approach, like I said, given that we've got this potential, kind of extreme, radically, it's extreme concept, and it almost sounds hilarious first hearing it, Why? It's because we give equal status to anger, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, and misery, to love and kindness and compassion, and sort of a normal person has a little bit of everything. There's no view, I think, in neuroscience or modern psychology that suggests, or there's no indication that you can free the mind utterly. We take it as a given, as a part of a normal person. So it's a bit radical to hear this idea. That's what Buddha means by nirvana. It's not some place. It's the end result of the person doing this inner work we're talking about. It's the development of the wisdom wing. That's the potential we all have. And we're talking the mind, not something mysterious, not something, in the sky. So given that, simply speaking, we don't want suffering, and we do want happiness, and given that everything I think and do and say is what produces that, then the onus is on us, isn't it? To do the weeding. Really, it's like that. So so this purification process is four main steps. The first one is attitude. It's good to remember the 4 R's. It's easy to remember. So the first step is regret. The second is called reliance. The third is the remedy. The fourth is resolve. Okay, so what's regret? This is a really good one, because when we hear regret, we hear guilt. Very strong. Guilt. Like if we admit to doing something wrong, we then go, oh, I'm a bad person. We immediately exaggerate our badness. We know we do that. It's an easy trap we fall into. It's the irony of ego that's what we do. And guilt is just anger, except you're the object, I did this and I did that and I did this and I'm a bad person. It's automatic conclusion. So it's hard to hear this one of regret as being something healthy, but we have to hear it. And even as Buddhists, people I know, Buddhists practicing for years, still don't hear it properly. So we have to really think about it carefully and practice having this appropriate approach. I remember the Dalai Lama was asked by someone, how do you distinguish between this regret that you're talking about and what we call guilt? Well, he said, it's interesting. He said, with guilt, you look in the past and you say, I did this and I did that and I did this, and then you conclude I'm a bad person. And then we know when we say sitting in that, mulling it over, feeling hopeless, it's not very active, is it? Nothing happens. You just kind of get miserable. It's not even, and anyway, it's not accurate. The Catholics, I'll finish what he said first. And he said, but regret The first part's the same. You look in the past, I did do that. I did kick the dog. I did kill my husband or whatever. That's true, fact. But then you say, what can I do to fix it? That's a very different attitude. It's proactive. Remember the Catholics, they say, all Christians maybe, don't criticize the sinner, criticize the sin. It's a good way to put it. So what we do is we say, I. And that's I am bad. And that's exactly what we do with anger. You know, you did this and this, and you are a bad person. And we know all these neuroses, they paint the whole person with the one brush. It's a good saying. So you did one bad action or even 27 bad actions. So therefore you are a bad person. We know it's wrong, especially when it's put to us, directed to us. We know we did one or two things wrong. We might have, but the whole of me being bad, that's just not true. And it's very clear it's not true. But we fall into that trap, with guilt especially. We just fall into that trap. So we have such self-loathing, while we even kill ourselves because we just find it too unbearable. It's kind of an incredible tragedy, really. So we really got to work on that, because literally it's not true. Yeah, killing someone's not so cool. Lying, stealing, not so cool. But the whole of you, and this is why it's so important for me and from my point of view in the Buddhist view to hear this view from the beginning and to remind yourself continuously that your mind is not set in stone and that you've got, your innate potential is for perfection and goodness. I mean, that's pretty intense. So to identify with that is very encouraging. Rather than the hopelessness, you know. So regret is really owning the fact that you did this and did that and did this and did that. But the crucial point is, why would I regret it? That's the thing to get clear, what it really means psychologically. Why would I say I regret having done that? And the answer is because it will sow a seed in my mind. And if I don't pull it out, it's going to ripen as suffering. Thank you very much. I don't want suffering. It's really uncomplicated. It's exactly like, you know, if you've got a tendency to get diabetes, and you know, say, well, you've eaten the wrong food, like sugar or whatever, you know, I'm not sure the details. And you discover you ate the sugar. Your first response isn't, oh, I'm a bad person. I'm so hopeless. I beat yourself up. I ate sugar. Beat. No. Oh my God, what a fool. I can't believe I ate sugar. Quick. What can I do about it? Why? Because you don't want it to settle in and ripen as future suffering. It's really logical. But we've got to train our minds in that thinking instead of falling into the trap of guilt, you know, self-hate. It's very, very powerful. But it obviously demands this ability to own responsibility. You know, like, you know, who was it this morning? Where is she? What's her name again? That one, yes. You got a new jacket, you got a new shirt on. She, you know, he said he didn't take responsibility. And there's, well, someone else said it too. He didn't take responsibility, you know. The person you accuse, they didn't take responsibility. It's very hard if you, especially if you're accused by somebody else. You did that. You want to defend yourself. But even when you say it to yourself, you know, it's hard to take responsibility. Kind of defend. It's not, or we go into the guilt, I'm not found, I'm a total disaster, or I did not, you know. We can see in our world, we have three responses. If we do say we did it, we get guilt, or we blame, or we deny. You know, so it's like if you eat sugar, you know, you blame the sugar company. I ate sugar, but it's their fault, and you want to sue the sugar company while you keep eating sugar. It's not my fault. Or I did not eat sugar. Denial, you know, ridiculous. Or I'm a bad person. I'll kill myself for eating sugar. You know, we're ridiculous. This one is intelligent, given the view that everything we think and do and say programs us, given that our mind is not set in stone, given that I don't want suffering and want happiness, all that's part of it. So it follows logically. I'll be delighted to remember I did this and did that and did this. So when you sit down to do the meditation, you know, you make it just very simple and practical, very personal. You just sit there and you sit down, you do your practice, and at the end of the day, then you go, okay, I regret. I regret what? Well, I mean, there's billions, you know, of things said and done and thought, whatever. But the key ones, maybe sometimes if it's not necessary today, you can check your day, especially if you go around family or at work and you're in the traffic and you curse at people and swear and scream, you know. There's some things to regret. And why? Again, why? If the instinctive response to this is I'm a bad person, because and then we're afraid we'll get punished. You know, especially if we were seen doing it, we're going to get punished. But this one is simply yourself. you're sick of, you say, I did do this, Robina. You're talking to yourself. You know what, and you know what, Robina? I regret having done it. Because why? Because I don't want to have the future result. I don't want suffering. It's very simple. You're being your own friend. It's like, this is what self-compassion is. I mean, the Buddhists don't use that term, but it's a very good one. You're taking responsibility, you're being grown up about it. I did do it. And it's okay, you forgive yourself because it's like it's an old habit. Karma is just habit, Some are very deep habits. That's why it takes time to change. And curse ourselves. Don't expect more of yourself than you can do. So you regret having done that, lied this, didn't do that, something else. And also sometimes in this life, certain things you've done, like maybe you cheated on your boyfriend, or you stole or something, or I don't know, or you have an abortion, for example. For a Buddhist, abortion means, because that what a person begins at the time of conception is when the egg and sperm come together. That's when the consciousness enters into the egg and the sperm. I always talk about my abortion. It's interesting to talk about the abortion because it also shows the dynamic of karma. So I'll use it as an example. I always use an example. I tell this story every time. Maybe I should change stories, but I only had one abortion, so I can only use one story. So when I was 23 in London, 1968, I was a hippie. And I remember the NHS had just approved it for, for free, NHS. So I felt very lucky, But there was this boy. I remember this boy. I don't want to give too many details. It's embarrassing. His name was Rob. He was Australian. I was working in a place in London, getting £13 a week. I remember, I met this boy. And I remember I was very envious. He was an architect, and he got £1 an hour. I was very impressed. I got £13 a week at my little job in Piccadilly. It was when buses cost like 2p. The train cost 2p. Now it's about £10 for just blink at the trains in London, isn't it? The tube and everything. Anyway, never mind. I'm just reminiscing. I'm being stupid. So there it is. This example. I was in bed with this boy, and it's interesting. I always tell this story, and many women have this experience. That second, I knew that I was pregnant. That second, I knew something had come into my body. I didn't call it a consciousness. I didn't call it a person. But that second, I knew I was pregnant. Many people have that experience. I don't know if men have it, but women have it. A friend of mine, her daughter was staying in her house with her husband while they were building their house, the daughter. And the daughter came down to breakfast and said, "Mummy, I'm pregnant." And she said, "Oh, good. When did you find out?" And she said, 40 minutes ago. Isn't that wonderful? Any of you women have had babies? Have you known that? Men have had your fathers?
I knew from my sister.
You knew your sister was pregnant?
Yes.
Well, at the time, you thought, oh, she's pregnant. Or you just kind of vaguely knew that she was pregnant?
No, I met her and I knew immediately.
Oh, at that time, seeing her. Okay, there you go. So it's really interesting. But this is a particular one because it's at the time the egg and sperm come together. That's when the Buddhists say consciousness goes in. Pretty much that time. That's when the person starts. But I've heard the Jews, the Christians say God puts the soul at that point, but the Jews I heard say he puts in the soul several months later. So if you have an abortion before that, it's okay. You're not killing a person, which is an interesting concept. Anyway, whatever. But this moment, I was crystal clear. But I know the next thought I had while I was with this boy, I didn't particularly like this boy, but I was being a nice hippie, that's okay. So I remember thinking, I'm going to have an abortion. Like, next thought. So now I've never had that thought before or since. I've never had the thought to kill anything. Never. Well, I did one time when I was trying to impress a boyfriend, and he used to go fishing. I never went fishing. Never thought of it. But I went fishing to impress him, and I kept putting the thing in, and no fish came to me. So even though I had the thought to kill, there were no fish to be there to be killed by me. I had no karma to kill, which is very fortunate. He was pulling in the fish, I got no fish because I had no karma even to have someone to be killed by me, which is how karma works, which is how living in vows protects you. You never need to kill because you won't ever meet the situation in which you're forced to kill. That's very much karma, So this person, that's very interesting. I'll use this example. So there it is. This obviously means, from the Buddhist perspective, that there's this person, I always call her she. There she was a few weeks before, dying. The karmic seed of her own virtue of non-killing was triggered that already programmed her to come to my womb. I didn't know about it yet. I hadn't even met this boy yet, but the karma was there. It was programmed. She finally left her body. She went into this intermediate state. They describe it in great detail, the death process, and where you go into this intermediate state, a bit like a dream state, kind of then waiting for your new mummy and daddy to hop into bed. You know, it could be immediately, it could be a few weeks. So I don't know how long she was there, but she came to my womb. So as soon as I hopped into bed with this bloke, egg and sperm came together, conditions ripened, she ran like a magnet. So that means also, then I had the thought, I will kill her. I had an abortion. I thought that. So that means she had that first karma to get a human body from her non-killing bank fault, but she's got these other 3 bank faults. So this other one was the tendency to kill. I don't know if she had that. She never got born because I aborted her before she got born. But she had the 3rd one. The experience similar to the cause of past killing is you get killed. Well, abortion is that. So already she had that karma. She had one karma to get a human body, but she'd had the other karma, this one, experience similar to the cause, to be killed by me, because karma is super personal. She could not possibly come to my womb if we didn't have this intense karma, and I couldn't possibly have even the thought to kill her if she didn't have that karma from having killed me. I mean, it sounds simplistic, it's more complex, but it's the basic principle. It's like a natural law, you know, intense karma between us. I remember a man years ago, a German guy, he told me when he was about 40, his mother told him that she actually was in the hospital ready to have an abortion. She was in her gown at the hospital, booked in, ready to go. She stood up, put her hand on the handle of the door, and she changed her mind. He was so moved by that. In other words, he didn't have the karma to be killed. And that's what you've got to realize in relationships, any kind, good or bad, that we're in this, like I said, like you are in a tennis match together. You can't say it's just you or just him. There's a really intense, dependent arising dynamic. This person and I have this intense karmic connection, you know. So that mother, she had the intention to kill. She was there ready to do it, but you could say he hadn't created the karma to be killed. Even if she'd had the abortion, it wouldn't have worked because he has to have the karma to be killed. So that's one, especially with abortions, women have a lot of guilt. Like this innocent baby, I killed it. But you've got to realize that baby in the womb they've caused. They're one of the crucial causes of the abortion. It's not throwing off responsibility. Oh, well, it's all her fault. No, it's very interdependent. We've got to realize that. Goodness as well. You know, you can be generous, but the person who's receiving it has to have the karma to be given, to be receiving something, you know. There's very, very powerful concept. There's a strong interdependence between us. You know, we're in this ridiculous karmic thing together. So anyway, I remember I thought I'd have an abortion. So I felt lucky because it was now free on the NHS. I went to the Charing Cross Hospital, saw this doctor. It was very weird because it was this strange room with black walls, like this funny room, some end of a corridor, this weird doctor, and he had to find some logical reason psychologically why I needed an abortion. So I told him something about my father or something, and so he accepted it. It was the weirdest room, black walls. I'll never forget it. So I got booked in, and the nurses were so kind, you know. So I had the abortion, but then they didn't do it properly. They didn't pull out the poor little fetus properly, so I had to go in again, have another D&C. I remember I got really depressed. I never get depressed. I didn't think of it I didn't think of it as a consciousness, you know. I just I knew what it would be when it came out the other end, a baby. I didn't want it, but I didn't think it through too much. I just knew it was a strong impulse to saying I wanted to do that. I didn't really give it thought, but I remember I was depressed, and the nurses were so kind. They gave me a private room and let me stay there for a week. I felt very fortunate. So I regret that action. I remember it. And of course, the point of, if you're a Buddhist, you take the view that your consciousness goes back and back and back and back. You've been animals countless times. You've killed countless beings. We don't get too intense on just one action. It's just the nature of samsara. We always think of a whale, you know, a whale opens its mouth and it's 40 years and it's one mouthful of one breakfast. 40 million little creatures get killed. I mean, that's a lot of killing. So the animals, we just do it second nature. So all of those are karmic imprints. Everything you do needs a karmic imprint. So then you think of a few things in this life, I regret, and you have to say to yourself, I regret having done that. Why, Robina? Because I don't want the future results. I don't want that seed to continue to grow and then to ripen as my future suffering. I don't want that. This is for your own sake. Regret is like self-compassion. It's got nothing to do with compassion for others yet. That comes second. This is you. And then you can think, if you like, you think in this life, then you think, and anything I've ever done since beginningless time to harm any sentient being with my body and speech, I regret from the depths of my heart, because I don't want those seeds to ripen. That's the logic of regret. It's very kind of wholesome, self-respectful. Then, of course, you think about the things like your ridiculous habits and your laziness and your this and your that because you're sick of the suffering. You've got to be sick of the suffering. That's what it's about. That's what compassion is for yourself. I'm sick of this suffering. I'm sick of these old habits. And then you go to the next step. Well, then whom can I turn to? Whom can I rely upon? Where's my doctor? And this is the crucial, I have to say this one again, the crucial difference between, let's say, the Christian view. When you're a Christian, you must confess, you regret to God, and this is the crucial point. You must then beg God to forgive you, because God's forgiveness is what purifies you. That's the method. So we have that in our daily lives, and I think sometimes we can misuse that. So if I've harmed, if Margot's my friend and I'm always being mean to her, sometimes I can misuse forgiveness. Because if you think when you have guilt, I'm a bad person, and the only thing that'll change me is her forgiveness, we think that. So then I ring her up and I'm so sorry, Margot, and I'm waiting for her to say, it's all right, Robina, I still love you. I go, oh, phew, off the hook again. But it's somebody who can misuse it, because I'm just getting her to make me feel better. If she's really my friend, she'd say, well, I'm happy to forgive you, Robina, but you've got to make some changes, baby. That's a really important point. So forgiveness in Buddhism, Buddha would forgive you. He's a nice person, but that's not even relevant here. He's not your creator. You don't need forgiving by other people. You forgive yourself. This is such an important point. So regret is kindness to yourself, sick of this suffering, sick of these bad habits. It's such a helpful attitude. You regret because you're sick of suffering. It kind of gives you courage. Then I think, well, whom can I turn to? Whom can I rely upon? You need a doctor. So this is our relationship with the Buddha. It's basically like a doctor or a mentor. He's not a creator. So whom can I turn to? The second step is, so it's called reliance. There's two bits there. So the first part is when we do the practice, we visualize now the Buddha above our head, a particular style of the Buddha, and we kind of delight. Really, it's taking refuge, we say, but it's really delighting. You've got a decent doctor. What a relief I've got a doctor who's got methods that I can use, because Buddha doesn't purify you. Buddha forgiving you is not the method. That's like, for Buddha, that's like going to your doctor and asking her to forgive you for smoking and then please stop me getting cancer. We would laugh at that. So this relationship with the Buddha for Buddhists is just like with the doctor. You rely upon them. They've got the wisdom to warn you about the problems. And so you rely upon the doctor. If you visualize the Buddha, and you delight you've got a doctor to rely upon. But the second part, it's curious where they put it under the heading reliance, but it's where you now have compassion for those you've harmed. The first one is compassion for you. Now you think of the baby I harmed. I think also of the doctor and the nurses who did this job for me. They killed on my behalf, Have compassion for them. Compassion for the baby that I killed. So I want to regret for their sake now as well, and purify for their sake as well. And the third step, you do the job. So the third one usually is called the antidote. You apply the antidote. I mean, if you've taken poison, you apply the antidote. Well, here, there's many antidotes. So if I'm regretting lying, let's say, in my daily life, I'll try and tell the truth. It's a good antidote. If I'm stealing, I'll try and give. If I kill, I try to help people and save lives, There's obviously a direct antidote. But the particular thing we do here in the Tibetan tradition, we have this particular meditation. We visualize the Buddha in a particular form, and we visualize nectar coming, this third step, nectar coming from the Buddha, nectar filling you. You purify all the actions of your body and speech and mind. And it's you visualizing the Buddha, and you're visualizing Buddha sending nectar to purify, but you are doing it. You're visualizing the Buddha. It's your mind that purifies, not Buddha. It's a really important point. It's just a skillful visualization. We visualize nectar coming through our crown, filling us completely. And then first of all, you visualize all the karmic imprints of all the actions you've ever done to harm others with your bodies. And they kind of go out through your lower orifices, like filthy, yucky liquid disappearing into space. You visualize, it's very creative. And the strength of your intention to visualize is what purifies. It's your mind. As Lama Yeshe says, it's our mind that creates negativity. So it's our mind that counteracts it, that purifies it with positivity. There's no other thing. It's not Buddha who does it. You know, you do it. You purify your mind. Then you visualize nectar coming again from the Buddha, and then it goes up to the top and goes out through your crown. And this time you're visualizing all the negativity created by your speech, you know, harming others, disappears into space. Then you visualize nectar coming, light coming, and this purifies your mind, all the delusions, all the fundamental misconceptions, all the delusions, all the neuroses. So you purify your body, your speech, and your mind. It's a very tasty meditation, very encouraging. And it's your mind that does it. As Lama Yeshe says, the power of purification is the power of regret, the power of your reliance, your compassion and refuge, the power of the remedy, and then the fourth step. And the fourth one, the resolve to not do it again. It's a no-brainer. Until you say, I will not do it again, you will never change. You've got to make some decisions. So if you've taken vows, you know, then you will reiterate those vows. You will say, I will never kill, I will never steal, I will never lie. But you don't say, I won't badmouth my boyfriend again if it's your worst habit. So you don't lie to yourself. You give yourself a timeline. It's very specific, this fourth step. So it's you being your own friend. And this is just very logical, psychologically. Changing. You know, of course, and because living in vows would be very powerful, as Lama Zopa says, that this also puts atomic bombs under the tendencies to keep doing those things and purifies already the seeds that you've planted. So it's got very practical applications. It's very kind of delicious psychological step, you know, the process. And then we do it at the end of the day. And you feel sad if you don't do it because it's really powerful. And because every second you're creating karma, it's so helpful to do it. And it gives you, and you die, and then as Lama Yeshe says, you go to sleep with a happy mind, you know. So Viviana, do you have any questions about that, darling?
I make this question because I feel that I need to go deeper in my purification.
What do you mean by that, sweetheart? I know I heard you say that, but sort of what do you mean by going deeper?
Because I do this practice not ever, but some very many evening, and I repeat. I analyze my day, all my action, and I regret and so on. And sometimes I feel that is like a repeat. I repeat, I regret for this, and the next evening I repeat, I regret for
So what's
this.
the problem with that, do you think? Where's the problem, do you think, Viviana?
Because I feel that I need to go behind my action.
Maybe, I think, I understand, it's good to feel that, but maybe you're pushing. You can't do more than you're doing. I mean, the only way you're going to go deeper is by having more concentration, but most of us don't have very good concentration. So, you know, you just don't push though. Be happy with it. You're doing well. You're very sincere. So just do it every day and be content. I think it's okay. And naturally, if you keep practicing, you will do it better. It will go deeper naturally. You can't force it to go deeper. It's so you can't sit there on the tennis court and say, I must play better tennis. You will if you keep practicing. But even you just said that you don't do it every day. Well, there's the answer. If you want to go deeper, you've got to do it more frequently. But don't push, don't be neurotic. It's okay.
No, okay. Yes, no.
Okay. But as long, I mean, the point is, as you know your mind more, you can then be more deep in the way you approach each of the four steps. You understand? The concept of regret can go deeper. The sense of your own suffering can grow. The sense of compassion can grow. I mean, it will grow naturally, but you do it every day. But don't force. It's okay.
Okay, I feel this that you say me
Good,
now.
darling.
I
Good,
feel
good, good.
this. Okay,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.
All right. Yes.
I want to go back to what you said as the consciousness enters the smell.
Yes. Yes.
And that will be, if you like, universal consciousness or infinite consciousness.
No, Buddhism doesn't talk about a universal consciousness. No, we're talking here. So may I know your name?
Michael.
Michael.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's Michael. So we can say that a few weeks before your very personal individual river of mental moments, your consciousness, it's just the word consciousness is the same as mind, and in this case is referring specifically to your continuity of mind, your consciousness, where your karmic imprints are stored. So it's a very personal thing. So that at the time of a past death, you went through this process, and before you stopped breathing, a particular karmic seed of your actions of non-killing was triggered that programmed you to go to your present mother's human womb when you joined the egg and sperm. So it's very specifically your continuity of river, your river of mental moments. It's specifically personal and it's yours. And everything that's happening, so then everything that's happened in Michael's life, you got the human body, that's due to your past non-killing. Every tendency in your mind, good at music, good at math, good at killing, good at loving, whatever it might be, they're your personal tendencies from the habit of having done them before. Everything that you've experienced in your life at the hands of others from the time you were conceived up until now, you've met sentient beings. They've harmed you, they've helped you, they've loved you, they've hated you, whatever. Each of those is your karmic experience. You've created that in relation to specifically those sentient beings. And then the fourth one, even the physical world, the way it impacts upon you, the way your body is healthy or not healthy. All of this is specifically from karmic seeds planted in this river of mental moments, your personal river. Now, as you keep, so then when your personal mind goes into that mother, off you go again, living out those past karmic seeds and creating new ones. But as you progress and become more spiritually advanced, as all of us, you'll lessen the neuroses, grow the goodness. So then your consciousness literally will be expanding and expanding. And by the time you become a Buddha, you'll be the same Buddha as Margot. You'll be the same Buddha as her. Your consciousness will pervade the universe. It will know that which exists. It'll be omniscient. It'll be powerful, and it'll be infinitely full of all compassion for all beings. And also you'll have the added one of out of your compassion. You don't need a body anymore, but you will manifest in bodies in different realms of existence to benefit sentient beings.
So consciousness existed before I was born.
Your consciousness and mine and hers, all these individual rivers of mental moments since beginningless time. Yes.
Is there a difference between my consciousness and the consciousness that existed before I was born and exists after I die?
No, it's yours. It's still yours. It's not labeled my. Okay, this consciousness, this river of. I mean, they even have a term in Buddhism. It's a mental continuum. So this moment of Michael's mind. And then the second before, and the second before. So thinking in that sense, like an unbroken chain of mental moments that go backwards to conception, you track it back to the second before that. And a few weeks before that was in another body. And a few weeks before the previous life, and it was previous life, and so on. When you die, your consciousness is programmed by what you've done in this life and by the past karma. It will leave this body. It will sort of be in this intermediate state. And when your new mother and father come along, it will join into that egg and sperm. It's a very personal continuity of the same consciousness, which is why everything you experience in this life is not coming from someone else's actions, it's coming from your actions. But you might have been called Mary or Fred or dog or cat before. The body, we just change shapes, we change bodies. The mind is a continuity.
So you're saying that there's a personal self.
Say it again.
There is a personal
Okay,
self.
this is the interesting point. This is where the Buddha diverged from the Hindus, or from those Indian views. There is a self, and we'll maybe got time to talk about that. There is definitely a personal self, but where Buddha diverged from the Hindus, they talk about this essential, permanent, uncaused Atman. The Christians call it an essential energy called a soul, right? But the Buddha says there is a self, but they've got a much subtler interpretation of it. It's not set in stone. It's a dependent arising. It's the fruit of past actions. So there is a self, but it's much more subtle. So there is a continuity of an I. Yes, definitely.
And what is the relationship with the continuity of that personal I and consciousness itself?
Okay, you need to tell me what you mean by consciousness itself, as if it was something separate. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that there's a conscious, you're right, I'm more a Vedantic person.
I can hear that, yes.
Yeah. So
the Buddha doesn't have that view. He does not have that view of essential energy that's called God or consciousness. He doesn't have that view. There's no view like that.
I agree with the word God. I don't use the word God.
Okay.
But I have been taught and
yes,
if you like, accepted.
Yes.
That there is a self, there is a consciousness before the sperm, and that consciousness will exist after I die.
See, I
a commonality between us all, because we're all part of, if you like, that universe.
Oh, okay, so no, there's no talk like that. Not
Okay.
the Buddha doesn't. That's why I think he diverged from those views. So the use of the words, we've got to be so clear with the definitions. You know, there is. So if you put it this way, the Buddhist approach would be there are trillions of individual consciousnesses. So then when each of them becomes a Buddha, then you could argue we're the same consciousness. But it's not as if there's anything that. But there's no Buddha consciousness outside of beings who are Buddha. There's not as if there's a Buddha consciousness we all go and join. There's not as if this is a fundamental starting point. Some call it God, whatever I don't know what you're saying, but there's nothing apart from individual consciousnesses. There's no such thing. Not for the Buddha. But then you can become the Buddha. You've perfected your consciousness. Now your mind pervades the universe. It has infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, and it will be the same Buddha that I become. But each of us have got there through our own individual hard work. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the way to say it. Yeah.
Ask one more thing.
Yes.
I actually asked you this about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And it's around the void, or if you like, emptiness.
Yes.
How does emptiness
Fit with
feed
this?
into
Okay,
what we just talked about?
this is exactly again where the Buddha diverged. That's exactly the point. This is the point. So let's just discuss that then. Okay. Okay. And all of these teachings we're giving here, including karma and cause and effect, lead to this. This is the consequence of this. The Buddha's view is that everything that exists, you know, things out there, trees, things, universes, hell realms, God realms, you know, who knows what, minds, persons, bodies, fingernails, noses, computers, everything that does exist, either a phenomenon or a self, naturally has no intrinsic nature. Nothing has an intrinsic nature. Nothing has an essential, inherent, in and of itself characteristic that is kind of pointable and findable. So the conclusion of that is that everything that exists, phenomena and selves, have they are completely lacking this intrinsic nature. They are empty of existing from their own side. They are empty of existing in and of themselves. They are empty of existing inherently, intrinsically, independently. So what the Buddha is saying is, now, let's get to these three main delusions. The root delusion is the one we're trying to conquer. Here in the first stage of the practice, we're dealing with attachment and aversion, but the root delusion that is the basis of all the other delusions is this primordially deep ignorance, maripa, ignorance in Tibetan, I don't know what the Sanskrit is, that utterly believes in the depths of our being in this intrinsic I. So it's referring to everything else in the world, but let's look at how it functions in relation to the I. Okay, so what Buddha's saying is this. He's got three, there's the nicest, the tastiest way to present this one about emptiness is in the framework of the two truths, they say, the two truths, conventional truth, ultimate truth, conventional truth and ultimate truth. So everything that exists has these two modes of being. They're not separate. So for example, a computer lacks intrinsic existence. Because why? It's the first reason is because it's the product of causes. There are countless causes that lead to that culminate in a computer. You won't find any essential computerness in that because it's a bunch of causes. And the same with the self. So there are phenomena, there's computer, there's table. So the name given to this phenomenon happens to be in the regular world, the name given to this phenomenon here and to that one is called person. So person, I, self, me, they are synonyms. They exactly refer to the same thing. A dog is a person, a Buddha is a person, a hell being is a person, and persons have mind. So you'd say mind possessors, you know, they're persons. So we know that that's a central player in our head, I. So the Buddha's saying he presents three levels of dependent arising to prove that everything ultimately has no intrinsic nature. So dependent arising is the term used, the shorthand for how things exist conventionally, and emptiness is the shorthand for how things exist ultimately. So this is the way, certainly in our tradition, the Gelugpas, the way we're taught. You know, this view is the view of the Prasangika Madhyamika, the middle way view, particularly of a particular school of thought. This is the best way to think about it. So if we take, the Buddha says, okay, so he presents three levels of dependent arising, and in fact, each of which is a particular argument with the views that he had previously. The very first one is and I'm mixing these up a little bit, there isn't that the I, the name we give this, is the product of causes. There's no such thing as a permanent uncaused entity called an Atman. Then the second one is a bit more subtle. We then also think there's an I, we think there's an I in here that is not cause, mistake. So he talks about cause and effect. So karma is a powerful example of cause and effect that can help already counteract the grasping at this permanent me. The second level, and let's discuss that one, is we all, because of this marimpa, because of this ignorance, we totally believe there is in here somewhere, among all these many, many parts, there is a particular part called I, self, like an owner that owns all the other bits and pieces. And we speak like that. I have a nose. I have anger. So, you know, there's all these logical arguments we should do first and then in meditation to prove that that one is a mistake too. It's a more subtle mistake. So let's look at that one. Let's discuss this one. So Buddha's saying we have that so instinctively. So then he's basically, what he's saying again is that we believe totally that when we say I, there's two mistakes we make, and this first one is the one I'm discussing. We think it refers to some special piece in here. So of course Christians say it's there. They call it a soul. The Hindus are what's the name? Vedanta, thank you. Says it's an Atman, right? I mean, maybe there are different views as well. So Buddha's not saying there's no I, but he says it's more subtle than we think. So when we say there's an I in there, so even in the world we say there's body, mind, and spirit. No, Buddha says there's body and mind. They're the components, and they are the parts. Body and mind or consciousness are the parts that make up the I. You don't have a separate I in there. So we need to use logical arguments there to try and see how that's not true. So it's like, you know, they have this meditation we do where the Buddha's saying, basically, if you think there's a separate piece in there, as one of my friends says, walking hand in hand with the other pieces, there's a breast, an eye, another breast, a knee. So they've got all these parts, you know. And they have this, we do this meditation where you search quite literally. There's this 4-point analysis we do. You first establish what you think this I is, and then you start to search for it. And the first argument is, the first logical one is to try and search for this piece called I that isn't the other parts. And Buddha would say that is very clearly not possible. Because so, you know, for example, you'd search for it. But another approach, I use the example of going to IKEA. It's a very nice example. You see a nice thing online called Michael. You think, oh, buy a nice Michael. You go there and they give you a bag of bits and pieces. So you've got to build your own Michael. So basically, we're putting all the bits together, and they know how to construct a Michael. They've done it well. And you keep putting the bits together, the knees, the nose, the eye, this one, that one, and you keep worried because you can't find the bit called eye. Because we believe it won't be a real eye until there's a special little eye that you find. I mean, it sounds silly, but it's how we feel. So that's one kind of approach. The other one is, you know, as Lama Zopa says, if like you say you insult me, you say, or you insult my nose, and Robina, your nose is so ugly. And I'll say, how dare you insult me, Michael? And you'll say, Robina, I didn't insult you. I didn't insult yourself. I insulted your nose. And we'll all laugh. So it's like the Buddha's saying there isn't a separate piece called an I. And again, if there were a separate piece called an I, okay, this is a little example I use. They say you have to sort of use logic to try and say if there's something does exist, you've got to point it out. And it's got to be different from something else. So I will say to you, maybe, you know, I have mala and a cup. So we look at that and we go, that's true. And how do we prove it to be true is we have to point out, because I said 3 nouns, 3 things. So we have to point out a cup that is not a Robina. And we have to point out a mala that is not a Robina nor a cup. So we have to show 3 separate independent phenomena. That is a simple example of 3 things that don't depend upon each other for their existence. There's no relationship. So that's a simple example. So now I'll make it more subtle. I have a nose and an ear. So without analysis, it's true. You can see, but you've got to analyze, because Buddha says we make a mistake. So if it is true, then we need to point out 3 separate, independent things. So we point out the ear, we point out the nose. So we now have to point out the eye that isn't the nose and isn't the ear and indeed is not all the other bits. Well, I don't know what the logic is about, the Vedanta or the Christians, but the Buddha would say if you search, and you've got to do the searching, you will find no I. Which doesn't mean there is no I. This is the point now. And now we get to the third level of dependent arising, and this is the subtlest one, that finally, upon not finding an intrinsic, separate, independent I, upon not finding it, you don't just throw out, Dalai Lama says, you don't just throw out all the bits and go, oh, well, there's no I might as well kill myself. That's nihilism. What you conclude is that as the Dalai Lama says, the I isn't empty of intrinsic existence because you can't find it. It's empty of intrinsic existence because it is a dependent arising. So this third one is that finally the word I, the word self, is a name, merely a name we impute upon the parts. It's not separate. It's neither oneness with the body and mind, nor is it separate from the body and mind, but it still exists. And as Lama Zopa says, once you really realize the emptiness of the I, there's not from the side of the I, which is the name we give to this body and mind. It's the name we give to the body and the mind, the name, the label, the name, that's all. When you've finally realized there is no intrinsic I in here, not one atom, it's as if there's no I ultimately, but there is dependent arising. There is an I, but what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. So it's this really fine, tricky kind of relationship between dependent arising and emptiness. And Chandrakirti, they say, says that when you start to be on track, whenever you say there is an I, the dependent arising I, you go, ha, that means it is empty of independence. And every time you go, the I is empty of being independent, empty of being intrinsic, empty of being inherent, they're all synonyms. That tells you it's a dependent arising I. So the two truths come together. They say that's the real middle way, when you can realize these two simultaneously. This is one way of talking. So there is an I, but as Lama Zopa says, what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. But when the biggest mistake the Buddha is saying is we want to point something out, and it has to be separate and independent. There can be separate, independent things, but there's no relationship. But we know there's a relationship between I and the body and the mind. We know that. We say the words all the time. So the relationship is much finer than we think, that's all. So it's not as if there's no I, therefore you might as well kill yourself. That's nihilism. Emptiness does not mean nothing. It doesn't mean there's no I at all. Not like that. What do you think, Michael? Is that different from 10 years ago?
Well, I think to some extent I'm relieved, to be honest.
You what?
I'm relieved.
That's interesting.
Because I've been trying to put together what you've been saying.
Yes.
And the Buddhist teaching.
Yes.
What my teacher is a man called Rupert Spira.
Yes.
Which is a non-dualist.
Yes, I understand. Yes. Yes.
Teaching.
Wonderful.
It's a different way. And the I that I think you're talking about, the personal self, is an illusion. It's an appearance in mind.
See, that's the interesting point. There is. See, that's where this view of emptiness of an intrinsic I doesn't contradict that there is a Michael, that there is a body, and that there is a mind, and there is even a continuity of mind that's unique to Michael. It doesn't contradict that. Because if we hear it as if there's no intrinsic I, that then there's nothing, that's a nihilistic trip. That's what Tsongkhapa says, we then fall into the abyss of the great mistake. And so it's a subtle point to not hear emptiness as nothingness. I'm not necessarily saying that. It's a more fine point. So I think what I find interesting is talking about the word in general. We might have done that 10 years ago, I don't know. But we know, as Lama Zopa calls it, ordinary emptinesses. Well, an ordinary emptiness would be if I pick up my cup and I go like this, I go, oh, my cup's empty. We have that experience. You look in the bank, you're convinced it's £5,000. Oh my God, my bank account is empty. So that's easy. That's an ordinary emptiness. And so I think the key thing is here to get really clear the philosophical use of the term emptiness. It's not just meaning nothingness. When I look in here and I say my cup is empty, I'm not saying, oh, there's nothing in my cup. What I'm really seeing is the absence of what I thought was there. So this emptiness is referring to the absence of something we thought was there. So the yogi, who's in their deepest meditation after all this, hard work, finally one day will have the direct, non-conceptual insight into the truth, the reality, finally, that there never has been, isn't, and could never be the self they thought was there. They don't discover nothingness. So what they're finding is the absence of what they thought was there, not nothing. That's a very different object of cognition. The mind always cognizes something. So, if you like, you can say, I'm cognizing the presence of tea, if there is tea. But if there's no tea, and crucially, if I'm expecting tea, I'm going to cognize the absence of tea. And that's a very vivid phenomenon. Not, oh, there's nothing in my cup. Not like that. In other words, if you've got a bank account, you've got £5,000, and you ask me to look in the bank, and I don't have any expectation of anything, and I tell you the truth, it's zero, which is really, in a sense, is nihilism. It doesn't matter. The point here is simply it's zero. I have no expectation. But if you look in the bank, you'll see zero for a millisecond, but you'll go, oh my God, where's my £5,000? So what you are cognizing is the absence of your precious £5,000. So the Buddha's saying for eons we've been grasping at this intrinsic separate I, and then when you're finally ready in your meditation, you'll suddenly realize the absence of that I, not, oh, there's no I there. That's not what you're seeing. So it's the emptiness of what you thought was there. And the joy and the bliss, Lama Zopa says, of the yogi discovering the absence of the I they thought was there, that has never been there, couldn't be there, and will never be there, which is the independent I, the intrinsic I. I find that helpful.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Huh?
That's very helpful.
Yes,
So
yes.
Thank you.
Yes, yes. So emptiness is a very rich thing. So the ordinary emptiness is very helpful. Because if the object I cognize in your bank is nothing, which is nihilism. What you cognize is a rich thing called the absence of your precious £5,000. And so that's why this emptiness is totally linked to expecting it or believing it's there. You don't just, we can say there's the absence of an elephant in this room. Who cares? It's true. But who cares? So always the emptiness you will see is of what you thought was there, or you wished was there, or should be there. That's the real dynamic of it. It's very rich,
People often call the presence of absence.
Say it again.
Often called the presence.
There you go. That's a very good way to put it. Very nice way. I like that a lot. That's good.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. Yeah.
There is a question on Zoom, Patrick, and
Yeah.
also Kate had her hand.
Okay, good. Go on, Patrick. Talk to me.
Okay, thanks. So I have a question about Vajrasattva, but so we learned the practice a little bit with Margot, and you explained some of it just there about it being like a skillful visualization. And then there's things like pujas, and then the tsog, and I'm just wondering what the difference is.
Sorry, what about the what?
A puja or a tsog.
Oh, you mean what are they?
Yeah, like are those also like a skillful visualization? Like, is there?
Oh,
there a
yeah. Okay.
different-
Okay. A style of practice we have in the Vajrayana, in the Buddhist tantric teachings. Okay, so the crucial thing there to understand, okay, we've got to go back a bit. So there's Buddha, okay? The word Buddha actually refers, the actual meaning of the word Buddha, the actual Buddha is really the omniscient mind that is pervading the universe, that of a person, who's finally become enlightened. Their mind pervades the universe, it knows everything, it's blissful, clear, wise, and has no body. It doesn't need a body. They've gone beyond bodies. That's the real meaning of the word Buddha. But then out of compassion, that Buddha mind, out of compassion, because sentient beings can't access that, we're not subtle enough, they will manifest in bodies to benefit others. That's the job. Do you understand me? Driven by compassion, they're going to manifest. And even the lowest level bodhisattva already has the capacity to manifest in 100 different bodies simultaneously. And that increases as they get more powerful. And by the time they're Buddhas, they've got the ability to manifest in billions of bodies. And there's 2 levels of bodies. And one is, they call it the Nimanakaya, the emanation body, and that refers to the human body. So Mr. Buddha of 2,500 years ago, the pictures we see and the statues we see, that's the body of a person whose mind was the Buddha, and he manifested in that Indian body, as a person to help others. Do you understand? So that's the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body. But then there's a subtler level, which is only visible to the high bodhisattvas. And that's all these so-called deities that we see pictures of in Tibetan, and even in, I mean, the Hindu one the same. They're all manifestations basically of different Buddhas, because there are countless Buddhas, but these different I'd say the best way to put it is you're going to have male forms, female forms, peaceful forms, wrathful forms, millions of them. They're all different. They're manifestations of different psychological qualities, basically, that we want to either purify or accomplish or develop. So, in the highest tantric practices, you might have one called Vajrayogini, and she's this divine naked red lady, and she's the manifestation of purified attachment energy. You've got Yamantaka, who if you met him, he'd scare the life out of you. He's the manifestation of purified anger. Then you have Chenrezig, who's very sweet, and he's the manifestation of compassion. You've got Manjushri, the manifestation of wisdom. Tara, the manifestation of action and power. Do you understand? So all these, it's just psychology, although it doesn't appear to us. And these are all the Sambhogakaya, and they're just these manifestations. And so people who have high realizations can actually cognize those forms. And these Buddhas, they're manifesting with these subtle light bodies. So all the Vajrayana practices we do, all sadhanas we do, are these visualization practices that visualize. You visualize that Buddha, you take refuge, you make offerings, then you visualize that Buddha coming into you, dissolving into you, you do a meditation on emptiness, and then you become that Buddha. So they're training in our becoming like that. And some of those pujas involve lots of practices, lots of prayers, lots of offerings. It's all related to these Buddhas, and the purpose of all of them is to help you become that Buddha. They're all practices. Do you understand me? That's the purpose of them.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
It makes sense?
Yeah. And
Good, darling. Okay,
the
Patrick.
only thing is, what's the difference between like when we just do it by ourselves and then when you do it in a group?
Oh, just because you do it in a group, that's all.
That's the only
That's all.
difference. There's no like other.
Yeah, I mean, Tibetan monastery spends half their day in their pujas with their bells and their dorjes and their drums and everything. And it's very nice to do that, especially when it's all nice with nice tunes and melodies and things. But when you do it on your own, you can do it in your. Of course, you do it on your. It's fine, no difference. It's you doing it. It's okay.
Yeah.
You understand?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Who else had a question?
Well, Kate had her hand up. But
Kate.
now she put it down.
Where are you?
She
Still there?
have a question?
No. Yes. Go, sweetheart. Talk. Can't hear you.
Hi,
Yeah.
thank you for teaching.
Good.
I just had a question about the purification 4 Rs. I want to make sure it's regret, reliance,
The remedy.
remedy, and resolve.
That's it. That's it.
Oh, okay.
So the three levels of dependent arising, Michael, that are each of which is is really a debate with the previous views. One is cause and effect, that I exists in dependence upon past causes. That's why karma is a great example. You set up what, and these causes are necessarily internal in that mind of yours, that continuity of your consciousness. All the causes are in there that ripen as your suffering or ripen as your happiness. That's a powerful one to loosen the grip of the ego grasping. The second one is one we just did a little bit, the IKEA one. There's a separate I. And I missed the third bit. There's two arguments in the second level. I'll go with those. I'll do the second argument in a minute. But the third one, which is the conclusion from doing these two analyses at the second point, and I'll tell you the second one, you conclude the third one, the subtlest, the actual truth, the actual reality of dependent arising, merely labeled. That Michael is merely a name that we impute upon the parts. So Michael has to have a valid basis. And Michael is the name your person, Michael, your particular one, is the name we give to that body and mind. So we know, so then even more bluntly, more simply, I is the name. So before you were Michael, that continuity of mind can be tracked back. And the I is always the label given to that combination of mind and then the more subtle physical energies, the wind energies, and there's Kundalini, which is the subtle body. So I is always the label. So you bring this subtle concept of self with you life to life, but it's not a separate self. That's the only way to say it. Self is the name we impute upon the parts. You can't separate it from the parts. It's not another part. It's not separate from, but it's also not oneness with. So it's more subtle. And that's how they say in the Prasangikas, that Tsongkhapa, especially his way of presenting this, it just seems like a very skillful way to put it, that there is an I, but as Amazopa says, it's so subtle, it's as if there's not an I, which is sort of a bit tricky, but And it's the antidote to nihilism, that there's no I.
Yeah, I mean, one of the objective of writing is to get rid of the personal self. Personal self or the ego or whatever you like.
You know, see, that's another way. Exactly, Buddhism wouldn't say exactly. Buddha would say, get rid of the believing in the separate I and the consequences, which are attachment and anger and the dramas. That's what you get rid of. That's what you get rid of. And then you discover bliss. I mean, Lama Zopa says the yogis, when they finally have seen for the first time the absence of what they thought was there, the joy is inconceivable. And also, I remember one time, because of course, I think Chandrakirti said, because as soon as you say I, which is that personal one you're talking about, it implies other, which is why the division, you know, because finally, it's really almost as if you could say, we're only really finally who we really are when we become a Buddha. Then there's no separation. Then there's no separate I's at all. Then there's no separate selves and no separate mind streams. We've all got these separate mind streams because of delusions. It's completely demented, you know. So finally, that would be how it would be. We're all Buddhas. It would be this one, you know, infinite wisdom. We all get there ourselves through our own individual path, though. But it's, the crucial point is it's not as if there's a separate consciousness that we join. Not like that. That's the way to say it. I wouldn't say that in Buddhism. But you could say, when you're Buddha and I'm Buddha, you could say we're the same Buddha then. There's only one Dharmakaya. There's one Dharmakaya. But it's not as if it's always there waiting for us to join it. Not like that. Which is the idea of God. The Christian view is God, and then you become oneness with God. No concept like that.
Be maybe a realization of that ultimate reality.
Say it again.
Would you call it a realization of the ultimate reality, that we are that unifying consciousness?
Okay, see, interestingly, in the Tibetan tradition, there are four, as you must know, schools of thought, and one of them say that they say we're already a Buddha. You have to realize it. But the other one would be on a practical level. That's a bit like saying an acorn is already an oak tree. Well, I'm sorry, try to get shade from an acorn. You won't. So, but it's helpful. It's psychologically very powerful to say it like that because it gives us courage. But technically, it can't be that way. If we're a Buddha now, I mean, to be a Buddha but not realize it is a bit schizophrenic. You couldn't be. It's like saying you're a perfect musician but you don't realize it. It's not possible. You can't help but hear the music. You're not stupid. So, but they do say, some of the traditions say it's helpful to think that way. You understand? Yeah. But to know that the one that they stress, though, in our tradition is to know that you've got the potential, the Buddha nature. That's encouraging enough. That my potential is so rich and delicious. And that's why it's good to remind us, even conventionally, of the conventional nature of our mind, which is pure and clear. Even just when you get samadhi, the joy is inconceivable. You know, just to know even that conventionally before you even become a Buddha is encouraging for us, I think. Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I'm sorry that what you're saying is completely contradictory.
Go on, say.
Because you're talking about as you're saying we have minds, you're talking about our mind,
That's
our
right.
consciousness,
Yeah.
and then you're saying it doesn't really exist.
No,
It's
no, I
not
think,
separate
okay,
and
no,
distinct.
that's exactly how it initially appears. I agree. It seems a total insane contradiction. I totally agree. But it's more nuanced than that.
I've got to say this, and it's
Say it.
okay. It's funny, I know. But when I try and read about and understand emptiness, when I hear what you're saying
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
all I can think of is, oh my God, if that's what the universe is really like, I'm so disappointed in the universe.
I understand.
It's just so complicated and negative.
Well, I mean, what's negative about knowing you can become a Buddha? How's that negative?
No, that's not negative.
Which bit's negative?
But if I can become a Buddha, I must be a separate and distinct being to a certain extent. At least. And you're saying there's no separate and distinct.
No, no, I'm not never saying that. I
Well,
never
you
said that.
it's just labels.
No,
There's no
I
such
know,
thing
but
as
it
the
doesn't mean like, but see, that's how we hear it. We're so fixated on hearing big fat lumps of individual me's. And when we hear it's merely labeled, it seems depressing. That's because we can't hear it properly. I'm not trying to be tricky.
So there are or are not separate individual me's.
There are individual right now living in samsara. We are definitely separate, honey child. Because if you play piano and you practice piano, I can't practice piano. If we were really the same, when you practice piano, I'll thank you and I'll start playing. No way. I've got to do it myself. So there, of course, there are separate now. There are. That's the point. But that's the problem too.
I'll just keep
I mean, we'll
understand.
just, you know, we've got to find the way. I mean, that's why there's so many different traditions. In Buddhism alone, there's so many traditions. In the Indian view, there's so many approaches, so many, we've got different kinds of mind, you know. I mean, when I hear some of the Tibetans, they debate with each other. Incredible. I mean, forget about the Indian views. I mean, when you study in the Tibetan Buddhist, when you learn all the Buddhist tenets, there are about 27 schools of thought, all different, because they're different human beings' minds, and that's perfectly fine. So we've got to fit, you know. So for me, when I first met these teachers, I didn't know I was a Gelugpa. I had no idea. They're called Gelugpas. I had no idea, but I knew that what they said suited my mind. Then I hear the Kargupas, I hear the Nyingmapa, I think they're wrong views. They're ridiculous. That's even just among the Buddhist views. There's so many kinds of minds. We've got to find the style and that suits our mind, you know. So keep trucking, girl.
I will keep, I promise I will keep trying to understand.
That's exactly right. But the very simplest way, I remember Dalai Lama one time who was asked, how do you put emptiness into practice in daily life? He said, it's simple. See things from another point of view. Because when we're caught in ego, and we know it, when you're caught in ego, you're a fundamentalist. This is right and that's wrong. That's the energy of these two extreme views. Fundamentalism. There's either something or nothing. Make up your mind, you know. It's fixated and sort of there's no nuance, there's no flavor there. So when you're really stuck, we all know that. You can't see past your own nose. That's the nightmare of ignorance. So as you get more spacious, you become more flexible and more spacious. And we know when as soon as you see something from another point of view, literally that's the point, because Buddha says everything is coming according to our view. The way Lama Zopa says, everything appears out there to us in the aspect of whatever's in our mind. So if anger is there, everything looks ugly, and I believe it. If it's delicious, everything looks beautiful, and I believe it. But that's why the key thing is, so anyway, Dalai Lama says, see it from another point of view. I mean, you see something square, you move to the left, you see it differently. It's profound, and that already is indicating things are merely labeled according to your mind. I mean, this is why my friend Sunny, living in this, objectively, conventionally, you label it, you define a prison, and it is exactly what it was, a garbage dump with barbed wire, where the food is terrible, the noise is a disaster. They are conventional facts. Conventional facts are not denied by emptiness. So then Sunny, unfairly done, in a cell on her own, nobody would choose that, okay? It is conventionally called suffering. She realized she couldn't change it, but she could change her mind. So by changing her attitude towards it, we all know this, she became more fulfilled, more content. So it's still ugly prison, still bricks and ugly and stuff, but her mind saw it so differently. That's really applying emptiness. If things did have an intrinsic nature, you could never see it differently. But that proves things don't have an intrinsic nature. Do you understand?
Like I have huge respect for what you
That's
said.
right. No, exactly. I know. This woman blows my mind. Every time I talk about her, she blows my mind. Therefore, she didn't suffer. So you can still say there's negative and positive. So, for example, to punch someone in the nose, in general, we would say it's a negative action. Well, when I did Kung Fu, I would get punched all the time, but I wasn't unhappy. In fact, I was taught by Mr. Lee to apologize to the person who punched me because I didn't get out of the way in time. So I wasn't going to sue the puncher. I thought, oh, that's Kung Fu, you know. So that proves emptiness. It proves there's no inherent bad thing, but it's still bad if it's done with the wrong intention. But it just proves it. The prison is a garbage dump, but she didn't go mad. She changed her intention. She changed her interpretation of it. This is the key to success. Not understanding things don't have an intrinsic nature. Do you understand? So next time your hubby is mean or he slurps his coffee, put it into practice. I mean, this is the hardest one. Just forget about prison. Just our hubbies, if you choose to have one of them. Do you have one of them?
No,
Oh, good. Well done, girl.
I like living on my own.
That's exactly right. I know. I understand. Okay. Yes, sweetheart.
Hello, it's me. I'm the needy one again.
Come on then.
I'm loving your kick-ass Dharma, by the way. It's
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic. Hopefully this is a quick one to answer. So, bodhisattvas, do they know they're bodhisattvas?
Well, it's the same saying as Michael. If you're really a bodhisattva, but you're really a Buddha, but you don't know it, that's schizophrenic. How could you ask that question? If you know you've just passed your first, grade 1 in math, or do I really know that I know that 1 + 1 is 2? Well, if you don't know it, do you? By definition. Do you see my point? It's sort of logical.
So they know.
Well, think about it, sweetheart. how could you know, how could you be, how could you know one, how could you pass the exam and tick the box and go 1 + 1 is 2 and not know you know it? How could you do it if you didn't know it?
Isn't the Mahayana tradition slightly different though? Do they vow to become bodhisattvas? Have I understood that right?
Different from what? Sorry.
From the Theravadan tradition?
What's the
where-
question? Ask the question again. What's the question?
So I'm trying to understand whether, because what I've understood is from Mahayana tradition, they vow to become bodhisattvas.
Okay, darling,
and-
no. Listen. Okay, so you're asking
Okay.
you're asking what is the Mahayana path? Is that what you're asking?
Not really. I just wanted to know generally with
You are right.
bodhisattvas.
Let us say yes and I'll answer you.
All right, go on then.
If it's not the question, ask me the question you want.
Okay, so how do the traditions differ from the Mahayana to?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Speaking simply, like I've been talking the 2 wings of the bird idea, you've heard me say that, right? Well, the
Yeah.
wisdom wing, if you did just the wisdom wing, you'd work on your body and speech, you'd live in vows, you'd stop harming others, you'd then gradually, then you'd abide by the laws of karma, you'd purify your karma every day, you become more harnessed, more together, more stable, you then go practice, you'd then go to your mind, you'd get renunciation, you'd understand attachment and aversion, you'd get rid of them, then you get single point of concentration, and then you'd realize emptiness, and then honey child, you are out of here. You've achieved your own nirvana, you're gone, and you won't come back. That's the Theravadan path. And that's the wisdom wing, effectively. So the Mahayana path shares those teachings, and they're the first stages of practice. On the Mahayana path, even if you've got to that point and you've realized emptiness and you're in this subtle state of bliss, you're a Hinayana Ahant, you're a superior being, you don't need to come back anymore because you've cut the root of all the dramas, you've realized emptiness, you've quit samsara, and you're in bliss. That's one goal. That's the Theravadan goal. If you're on the Mahayana path, you might even have achieved that level, but because you're driven by this compassion and this bodhicitta, which is this powerful attitude of wanting to become a Buddha, because the suffering of others is so unbearable and it's your job to help them. So even if you have gone beyond needing to be reborn, you're going to, because of your bodhicitta, you will naturally take more and more rebirths again and again. And as you progress, like on the very first level of the first level bodhisattva who's realized emptiness, Arya bodhisattva, you already have the power out of your incredible compassion and power to manifest in 100 bodies around the universe. And as you increase through the 10 bhumis up to Buddhahood, by that point you have got the ability to manifest in billions of forms throughout billions of universes, and you finally become a Buddha, and then you continue to manifest in bodies to help others as long as time exists.
Okay then. Thank you.
Okay. Something like that, darling.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So I remember when Lama Zopa was a little boy, and he was said to be the reincarnation of this previous Nyingma yogi up in the mountains of Nepal, tantric yogi, who's really got things under control. So then when he was a little boy, he got recognized as a very little boy because he sort of behaved differently. And as soon as mummy turned her back, he was born up as a Sherpa. But he'd turn, he'd be up there crawling up the hill, going back to where the cave of the previous Lama was, and they'd say, come home. He'd say, no, that is my home, when he's a little boy. So they finally had the local Lamas recognize him as the reincarnation of the previous yogi. So then he was sent up the mountains with an uncle to start studying. He was at 8 or something. And then there's this story, he tells a story about how he, I have to just have a drink, excuse me. There's this big river. It must have been 1952 or something. There's this big river, and on the other side, it wasn't very deep, but it was very tumultuous. And on the other side of the river, these weird-looking people, the Sherpas call them white-haired, yellow-eyed, which just means white people, I mean, obviously must be Swedes or something. Anyway, he wanted to meet them. He'd never seen these people before, and he wanted to meet them. So you don't go empty-handed. So he had his bowl of boiled potatoes, and he was walking on the rickety bridge, and he fell in with his potatoes, So of course they don't teach them swimming there. So and this is how he told the story. He was 8 or something. So he said, the head came to the surface, and he saw his manager having a panic attack, running along the bank. He's losing a little Rinpoche, and then he'd go down again for the water, and then he'd come up again. But I'm going to more, but why he said the head, not I came up for air, not like that. the head, he said, very objectively. Then he kept going down again. And then he said to himself, it occurred to me that the person known as the Laudo Lama, he's called, this little area is known as the Laudo Lama. It occurred to me that the person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die, not I'm about to die. Very interesting, that. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, meaning in that life he'd heard no teachings. He's 8 years old, but there was no fear. And this is the simple point that Buddha's making, that when you've gone beyond ego, when you've quit the dramas, quit believing in the fantasy separate I, quit all the voices of I, the attachment, the rage and the nonsense and the negative karma, quit this sense of a separate self, neurotic and deluded, when you've quit that utterly, you no longer have fear. They talk about samsara. What Buddha means by samsara is living in all the fears of attachment and aversion, the anxieties and the worries and the fears and the dramas that are driving everybody. We can see the nightmare of the world. So when you've gone beyond that, there is no fear. So the interesting point, I think, is, wasn't it Mr. Darwin or somebody who talked about instinct for survival? You observe animals, when something goes wrong, they panic and they run. But I mean, so basically we think you need this fear to function. Well, Buddha says, how stupid. You need intelligence. You don't need fear to know that you're drowning. You need intelligence to know you're drowning. Well, he knew he was drowning, but there was no fear. So that doesn't mean he's going to sink to the bottom of the river like a stone. Oh, well, I'm drowning. What the hell? No, he still came for air. He would have looked like a little boy, like that. But his mind was totally clear, undisturbed. That's the part that's too shocking for us. That's the simple consequence of even less delusions. Forget about emptiness. You become more stable, less neurotic, less up and down, less drama queen, because that's what delusions cause. That's why we suffer so badly. So finally, when you've cut the belief in the intrinsic I, and clearly, once you got that, you can never lose that. You can lose bodhicitta. You can even lose bodhicitta at a certain point. And the Buddha would say we've had samadhi in countless lifetimes, but we've never quit. We've never gone far enough. It's the Buddha's view. We've never cut the I totally. So as long as you don't have the I, still believe in the I, you're going to go to the formless realms, all those levels of concentrations that the Indians talk about, but you're still in samsara. You haven't quit the I. You haven't realized emptiness. That's where the Buddha diverged. And he would suggest his more subtle understanding of the nature of I, the nature of self, But the key one is emotionally, as you practice, you suffer less because you're less neurotic. You're more brave in the face of dramas. You're not seeing them as so concrete, which is what the delusions cause. This fundamentalist ego grasping sees everything as absolute and concrete. We're constantly having panic attacks, aren't we? Jealousy is a panic attack. Anger is a panic attack. Anxiety is a panic attack. Attachment is a panic attack. You lessen those, forget emptiness, you're already more steady, more courageous in the face of the dramas, It's a progression. It's a gradual progression. And then you get more compassion and more love and more empathy, even more powerful. And then finally, as Chandrakirti says, when you've finally given up the believing in the separate I, there's no longer a separate other. By definition, That's why infinite wisdom and compassion. Very logical, really. Very delicious, isn't it? Can't wait. But these views are very subtle, even the Buddhist views. I can't tell between the Buddhist views. They're so subtle, the differences, not to mention all the Vedantic views, So many views. So it's a very fine point, I think, isn't it? Just to keep hearing them, keep practicing. One step at a time. Catherine, it's because, Buddha's saying, because we so believe in the separate intrinsic me, as soon as we hear emptiness, we're like, oh, we're only merely labeled, how depressing, we can't help but hear, therefore, in a sense, therefore there's nothing. And that the point is, it's not like that. It's far more subtle and more nuanced than that. So if you hear that when you realize emptiness, you become blissful and joyful, and clearly it's not that. But it's we can't hear it like that. So we just have to persevere with it, take time, not jump into conclusions too quickly, not get too stuck. It's an incredibly subtle point. So I think, again, let's talk a bit more about this business of how, like, what was that nice phrase you said, Michael? The joy of the presence of the something of the
Presence of the absence.
There you go, the presence of the absence. It's really tasty. That's very delicious. Let's look more at that. The use of the word emptiness, I mean, we can be forgiven for thinking it means nothingness. We can be forgiven for thinking that. It sounds like that. So like, again, your question, Catherine, like, when we talk about the two truths, this way we present, Tsongkhapa presents, and it's Buddha's teaching, you've got conventional reality and ultimate reality. So you could, of course, argue from this. So in other words, already even saying those words from this perspective indicates that ultimate reality doesn't imply there's nothing. It doesn't contradict something. But it's sort of like, in other words, I mean, they say we're on the right track. So right now, if we hear emptiness from the side of the eye, there is nothing there that makes it the eye, we can't help but hear, no, there's. So then we can't help but hear that. As Tsongkhapa says, we can't help but fall into the abyss of the great mistake, Oh, well, there's nothing, I might as well kill myself, And it sounds like that. Of course it does. And only because we're so believing in this concrete, fat, big, set in stone, independent, intrinsic, uncaused, thing. So then we hear there's nothing of its own side, empty, and then we hear, well, there is something. We'll think, well, come on, Buddha, give us a break, make up your mind. Is there an I or isn't there? But there's no contradiction. So when we're on the right track, and we should practice that. Every time we hear there's no I, we can't help but fall into the, what is it again? Nihilism? What's the word? What's the right way to say it? I'm so used to saying it the other way. Nihilism. Okay, good. Thank you. So then we can't help but then as soon as you catch yourself, and this is the real point, when you say the I is empty of existing from its own side, then you say to yourself, ha ha, that means it's dependent arising. And every time you hear, ha ha, there is a dependent arising I, instead of clinging to it, and saying, thank God there is something, you go, ha ha, that means it's empty of existing from its own side. So in other words, emptiness of existing from its own side, or more simply, emptiness of existing independently, which is what ignorance thinks. Emptiness of independent existence means existing interdependently. They mean this in that sense when you use the word independent and interdependent. Absence of independent means interdependent. So they do mean the other. Each means the other. When we start to hear that, and we're moving towards the middle way. And they say, finally, only when you've achieved Buddhahood do you cognize the two truths simultaneously. So even the greatest yogi in their meditation, completely absorbed in emptiness, completely absorbed in the emptiness of intrinsic existence. When they come out of their meditation, back into the world, things still appear to exist from their own side. They still appear to exist independently, especially of the mind labeling them, but they don't believe it. They use this nice analogy of the magician who seems to be able to conjure horses, for example. And so there's an audience and there's the magician. The magician has conjured a horse, these clever people with their mantras or something. So they all see the horse, but the audience believes it is a horse. But the magician knows it's an illusory horse. That's the difference. And the yogis are like that. They don't get caught up. They don't, even though things appear to be out there from their own side, having nothing to do with my mind. But they don't get trapped. Or, one time in one of Tsongkhapa's Lam Rinpoche's, the yogi in their meditation, cognizing directly the absence of independent existence, then they come out of the meditation, and they pick up their cup. They know this has no intrinsic nature, but it still functions to hold their tea. There's no contradiction. Nevertheless, it still functions to do exactly as you defined it. That's how they say. So that's why they talk about the appearance of things. When you realize emptiness, or even got a slightly closer understanding of emptiness, things are still there. Uncle is there, auntie is there, dog is there, cat is there, knife is there. You don't say there's nothing there. That's nihilism. But it's not so concrete. It's much more spacious. That's a simple way of putting it. And we can see it, as I said before, when we are really caught up in the voices of ego grasping. Ego grasping is not the colloquial term for this maripa, this ignorance, the one that believes in the intrinsic me. So, and like I said, that when we really see that they're all in a state of panic, fear, when Buddha says the fears of samsara, just the word samsara, I think, is referring to being caught up in all these neuroses, caught up in the neuroses. And when we understand the subtlest meaning of emptiness, it's merely labeled that things don't exist independent upon things exist independent upon the first one, causes. That's karma. Certainly depends on my part, causes. Second, things exist independent upon their bits and pieces, independent upon their parts. But third, most subtly, the conclusion you come to is things exist in dependence upon the mind calling it that. The mind perceiving that. This is why the mind is the central player in the universe, in fact, even the cause of all universes, and including hell and including Buddhahood, the mind. One's mind, one individual mind, your consciousness, your actions, your thoughts. So there's levels of reality, if you like, in the way we put our presentation in the Tibetan tradition, in our tradition of the different stages of the path. We call it the Lam Rim, the stages of the path. The very first level is, just play safe, behave nicely, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, live in vows and purify. You're mainly dealing with the servants of the mind. You're mainly dealing with the behavior. You're calming your berserk energy down. You're stopping creating heavy negative karma. Already you're purifying your mind. Already you're loosening the grip a little bit of ego grasping, because you begin to take responsibility, not feel like innocent victim, Then you go to the second level, even more deep. You go into the mind itself now and start to look into attachment and the neuroses and see how they cause so much pain. And already you're starting to understand, to practice, seeing things differently, or really not believing in your karmic appearances. Already you're applying emptiness here. So with attachment, for example, this emotional hunger that's craving for the cake, and then through the lenses of your attachment, the cake looks utterly divine. The more the hunger is there, the more the emotional hunger is there, the more divine the cake will look. The way the cake appears back to us is in the nature of what's in our mind. That already is implying emptiness. So as you loosen the grip of attachment, the cake looks less. It doesn't look disgusting. You're not so gripped by it. It can still be delicious looking, but you're not so grasping at it frantically. That energy's gone out of it. But in the end, the irony is when you're less attached to it, you get more pleasure, because attachment ruins the pleasure. And as Lama Zopa says, a really powerful way to practice every day is to stop. He says, don't believe in our karmic appearance. The karmic appearance is really another way of saying emptiness. Things exist out there due to our past karma. It doesn't come from its own side. That's what it means, emptiness. It doesn't come out of us. In other words, that's how we feel. Ego feels like I'm plonked on this planet, no choice. I'm given these bad things and these good things. It's all just good luck and bad luck, and it's all just random. I mean, no wonder we go mad, but that's the materialist view, with great respect. You're plonked on this planet by someone else. You're given craziness. You're given psychosis. You're given love and compassion, and and then stuff happens. I mean, there is no logic to that. No wonder we're all crazy. No wonder we're all angry. It's our karmic appearance. Everything we see, taste, touch, smell, not an atom of anything comes from its own side. Comes without a cause related to the perceiver. We can have common experiences. We all have, we all have the common experience of the rainbow. People who happen to see it, Common experience of the pandemic. But each of us, experiences it differently according to our karma. We can see that. According to what you programmed your mind with. So to not believe in your karma means really applying emptiness. Meaning, believing in it means it's set in stone. There it is. How dare it be there? I don't deserve it. Who do you think you are? That's the ego's view, Or the delicious things come, you better be there and I deserve it, so give me more, This is attachment and anger. So don't believe in how it appears. Be more spacious, It's already applying emptiness. and own the appearance. Own it, it's yours. Those trees, those flowers in your garden, they're yours. You planted them, own them. Then enjoy them, absolutely. Whereas if you have attachment approach, oh, aren't I lucky having all these vegetables, and you greedily eat them up and then wonder why there's no more. Why aren't there more veggies in my garden? Why is nobody putting more veggies in my garden? This is the view of the victim. How dare there be weeds? It's ridiculous. How dare there be suffering happening to me? You caused it, baby. This karma is implying emptiness. It's powerful. Cause and effect. You begin to own everything that's there. You own the good and you rejoice in your virtue and you create more. You own the misery and you know you don't want it anymore, so you stop doing it. You learn from it. That's the way you apply karma. It's already loosening the grip of ego grasping. And then, of course, you've got the compassion wing and the wisdom wing. So, you've got all the wisdom approach, which is the way of loosening the grip of the delusions and then eventually realizing emptiness. But the compassion wing is another whole kettle of fish. It's like a whole different approach. Each helps the other, but there's specific methods. You've got to practice the wisdom methods of realizing emptiness to cut ego. But you also, in order to have empathy and compassion, you've got to, cut self-centeredness. So there's different approaches. So in the Lamrim, the way we talk, the first two scopes, the main enemy is called attachment, this grasping at what I want. Grasping at what I want, attachment to get what I want. But the enemy on the compassion wing, the goal is to try and get this bodhicitta, this outrageous paradigm shift in the mind, where now only others appear, only others are what you think about, which is pretty intense. We can't imagine that in our culture. And you now have you've changed the cherishing. They talk about the cherishing of me to the cherishing of others. It's pretty powerful. It's a culmination of all the stages of practice on the compassion wing. So there's a very specific practice to cultivate this love and compassion that culminates in this outrageous approach called bodhicitta, to benefit others, to become a Buddha, to help others. That's the purpose of your life and lifetime after lifetime. But you can have compassion and love till the cows come home. You can even have bodhicitta, but you can't escape from the path. You've got to realize emptiness. And you can get emptiness, but you've still got more to do. Compassion is so much more powerful. You won't come back into samsara, but you'll still be limited. That's what the Buddhist view is saying. You have to practice two wings of the bird. And every time you give up attachment, it makes you a bit closer to others. And every time you consciously practice trying to reach out to others, it helps you give up attachment. So they each help the other, It's obvious. And at different times of the day, you practice different things. You've got your toolkit and you know which one you need. Maybe you've got to shut your mouth one day. Maybe you've got to be kind the next day. Maybe you've got to practice different things at different times in your toolkit. You choose, you know what's best. So the practice of this transforming problems into happiness, as they call it, is obviously a much more advanced, and it's on the compassion wing, but it's totally rooted in understanding emptiness, in understanding that things don't have an intrinsic nature. So, it depends on where you're at. If you're in a relationship that's really abusive and you've got no self-respect, you're completely caught up in misery, excuse me, to hear that you should, accept the abuse, it sounds like, you'd be sued if you were told that. But if you're at that level of being a bodhisattva, that is grist for your mill. You'd be happy, because it's a question of what level you're at. But to know where we're at on the path, what we can handle. Like I said, but at one time, Courtin Sencha Rinpoche mentioned some level of bodhisattva. Obviously, it's realized emptiness. He said the action for that bodhisattva of cutting off their hand and feeding it to a starving animal is as inconsequential as a leaf falling off a tree. In normal terms, that's like a mental illness, isn't it? Completely demented. Absurd. You can't believe it. So that indicates already emptiness, already showing this person does not grasp at the intrinsic sense of self, knows there is no intrinsic self. But radiantly joyful, this is the irony, radiantly blissful and joyful. And there's incredible level of compassion that what dominates when they see that person, what totally dominates is the compassion, seeing their suffering. And there's no food around. Obviously, there's a butcher shop. They're not going to be stupid and cut their hand off. They'll go to the butcher shop. But because the bodhisattva's mainly got the view of it's my job. That's the key factor of a bodhisattva, that this powerful sense of responsibility. It's my job to benefit others. So you see the animal in front of you, starving animal, please have dinner and have the other one as well. So that doesn't mean they don't have a physical sensation. They do. They will have there'll be a feeling, either pleasant or unpleasant. But what's interesting is the more there are the delusions, the more there is attachment and anger, the more powerful will be the painful feeling. We know that. We'll go crazy. But for a bodhisattva, the compassion is so dominant. That's why it's like a leaf falling off a tree. They know their hand's been cut off. They can see the blood. They feel it. Not stupid. But the compassion is so tremendous. I think we can understand that. Even I remember one time on the television, what mothers do for their children, like one woman picking up a car that was on her baby, you know, another woman running into a burning house. So clearly they've got attachment, but you know, when you're so focused on that baby, if you start saying, oh, the house is burning, forget it, you'll stand still. All she had in her mind was her baby. So she ignored the fire. We can understand that, you know, we can understand that. So bodhisattvas don't even have attachment and even cut their hand off. You know, because the compassion is so dominant. There's no longer grasping at I, you know, and there's no option. There's no butcher shop. The animal's starving. It's the story of the Buddha, isn't it? In Namo Buddha, near Bodh Gaya, near Kathmandu. The story of the Buddha at some stage of bodhisattva, whatever life it was, and the mummy tiger. He saw the mummy tiger starving, and the babies are starving, and because she's starving, she's going to eat the babies. And he had such compassion for the mummy tiger to create the karma of eating her babies that he fell onto the ground and cut himself so that he was bleeding, and he offered his body to the mother so she didn't kill her babies. That's compassion. But I'm like, ridiculous, you know. That indicates the level of emptiness and this level of practice, you know. That level, it's hard to imagine that level of compassion. I can't imagine. I say it, I repeat those stories, you know, but you think, excuse me? Excuse me? Of course we can't imagine it, you know. Because you have a normal sense of a normal self grasping at a normal eye. It's so tremendous, you know. So that's a possibility, and that's possible. We hear the saints, when you hear those stories of the saints, isn't it? If that is possible, then we can see how far we have to go. And that's okay, we can go there. Not get depressed about it. One step at a time. You can't leap up and cut your hand off before you're ready. That would be very silly. Or like, for example, Lama Zopa, since he's a little boy, he's reincarnated and recognized since his last rebirth. And in those yogis, they don't need sleep. Their mind goes to such subtle level, they don't need sleep. They're highly evolved yogis. They choose their rebirth. You know, even with this little boy, he didn't need sleep. So in this life, you know, when he passed away, they asked me to write this eulogy, and it was so moving to hear all the different stories. For him, as the Venerable Roger, his attendant, said, for him, sleep was a disgusting waste of time. I mean, to hear that is like a joke, isn't it? Like demented. So I know for me, I couldn't possibly do that. Not possible, not at the moment. But just to say, oh, I can't do that, it's not possible, you never go there. So I want to go there, maybe next life. So when I go to sleep, I hit my head on the pillow, my delicious bed. As you get older, bed's the most delicious place of all, isn't it? Forget about sex and drugs, who cares about that? So sleep is very delicious. And I hit the pillow, I have a very nice pillow, and I say to myself, may I find sleep disgusting. So I program my mind with it. Hopefully next life I won't care about sleep. They say karma gets very strong from life to life, good and bad. So we've got to know where we're at. So one day maybe I'll give my hand to an animal. Maybe that's, you know, one step at a time. But the one that's encouraging to us, forget all the compassion, that to me, kind of like, so it makes me tired. What? I've got to have that level of compassion? Give me a break, you know. Some people are really moved by that. That's what drives people onto a spiritual path. And when I first heard all these talks about bodhicitta, when I first met the teachings, I thought, this is ridiculous. What are they talking about, you know? Then what helped my mind actually was interesting. What helped my mind, I heard the Dalai Lama say, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. That gave me a doorway in, you know. I thought, oh, that's helpful. At least I can, that one makes sense. You know, still can see the benefit to myself. Nothing wrong with that. But the one I think is we need, because we have such self-loathing and and we have such limited view of who we are, I find so encouraging to hear about the mind and how its potential, how I have this incredible potential for joy and happiness. Literally, not some hippie trippy thing, but literal, you know. That I find encouraging. Then it gives you courage to persevere. In other words, instead of guilt, having anger and depression and anxiety and attachment, not guilt, but encouragement to know that that's why you're suffering and you want to be free of suffering. If you just have guilt, you'll never get anywhere. You'll never grow, you know. Guilt is ridiculous. And we should want to be happy. Don't think it's selfish. That's the first stage of the practice. That's what renunciation means, giving up suffering and its causes. And what's the result? Your happiness. I mean, Buddha talks about it as a path to get rid of suffering. It's a path to get happy. It's another way of putting it. It sounds more uplifting, doesn't it? A path to get happy. And this is why it's so encouraging. I said I interviewed Venerable Rene about his meditation retreat. And he didn't even achieve the 9 stages of samadhi. He just achieved the first 5. And he said already the joy that his mind experienced in his own meditation, in himself, was so superior to any joy he'd ever experienced through his senses. That's really encouraging. You know, that's really encouraging. That's our potential. The word emptiness is important, like this one of the absence. This is the really important point about it. You know, I'll use the ordinary examples of these ordinary emptinesses. You know, and that's I think the crucial piece is that the only person who's going to notice the emptiness, the absence of tea in the cup, is the person who expects tea. That's a crucial point. The only person who notice the absence of £5,000 in their bank account is the person who expects £5,000. And these absences aren't nice absences, but they're still an absence. They're, as Lama says, ordinary absences. That's another way of saying emptiness. Emptiness is another word for absence, that's all. Don't think of something hippy-trippy. The cup is empty of tea. You know, the bank account is empty of money. Well, this person is empty of a characteristic called independent nature, independent self. This person lacks the characteristic of being independent. You see, the trouble is we don't think, what we say, well, why is Buddha telling me that things are dependent on arising? Why is he telling me things are empty of independence? Because obviously we must think it. He said, but because it's so primordial, we don't know we think it. Our mother didn't teach us. It's just we brought it with us. You know, it's there deep in our bones, an assumption that there is an independent I, that there is an intrinsic, real, independent, concrete, solid I. The assumption is so deep in us. So for us to hear that there isn't one of those, obviously to understand, we have to know what it would be if it did exist. That's why when you do the 4-point analysis, the first point is establish. They say we need to establish clearly in our own mind the object to be negated. So then what Buddha's saying is, I'm telling you, he says, there's no intrinsic I, but you've got to try and conjure in your mind a clear picture of how you think it exists. You must do that first, because then he says we have to search for it. Seems very odd. And there's 2 ways. I only did one. Let me do the second one. So there's 2 types of 2 searches we have to do. If there is here among the parts, body and mind, if there is here among the parts, the body and mind, an I, it's either of 2 things. It is either going to be separate from the body and the mind, meaning a third component, like we said before, body, mind, and soul. There's either going to be separate from the body and mind, or the second one, which is more subtle, which we didn't do yet, or will be oneness with the body and mind. So that's one. So one mistake we make is, you know, I am ugly. I have anger. There's anger and then there's I that wears it, you know, like a dress. Or the other one is all of this is I. And this one argument doesn't sound so convincing to us. So the argument is, if, as Lama says, the label I cannot be the same as the base. It can't be. Cup, okay? So first you define something. You be very clear conventionally, what is it before you have to establish first what is it conventionally before you start to discuss it ultimately. What's that, mummy? It's a cup. What's a cup, mummy? And you're asking her for the definition, and she'll give you the definition. It's a flat bottom clay container. That's the first part. It's its conventional characteristic. But you don't know what it is yet. You need to know. And this is a really crucial point. But mummy, what does it do? What is it? What's its function? Even what's its meaning? There has to be this. Well, darling, it holds my tea. It's a tea holder. Isn't it? But don't believe her. Won't believe anything anyone tells us. Look at all the conspiracy theories around. She has to prove it to you. This is how you establish things existing even conventionally before you get anywhere near emptiness. So she'll say, oh, that she'll have to get her tea, and then she will get the tea and she will pour it. And we will both see it fits the definition. It holds her tea. But even more you should do, they say, to really prove it conventionally, you then establish that there's no other thing that has the same definition that's different in the world that you live in. There's nothing else that contradicts that. Then you tick the box, you shake hands, and you all agree conventionally this is a cup. Now the hard work starts, because what's happening now is ego grasping, delusion, that the maripa is believing it's an intrinsic cup. It's an independent cup. It's an inherent cup. There's cupness there, having nothing to do with me looking at it, having nothing to do with anything else, in itself, in isolation. We don't know we do that, but that's what we are doing all the time. But once we've established conventionally what it is, we now to see its ultimate nature, how it's absent, how it lacks that very holder of T-ness intrinsically. So, first of all, so the second one is helpful here. This is a cup in itself. The cup is where? The cup is the handle, the cup is the sides, the cup is the base. Okay, good. So we've said the word cup, we've said handle, and we've said base. 3 things, 3 nouns, 3 things, 3 objects, 3 phenomena: cup, handle, base. Or the sides, whatever you want to call it. So we are convinced there's 3 things, right? This is the first argument. We're convinced there's 3 things. So the logic has to be, then you take away one of those 3, the handle, there's the handle. You take away the other part, the base, and there's the base. Now what's left? There's nothing, is there? There's only 2 things there. Where's the third thing that's called cup? It's very simple. The body's more, the body and the mind are more complicated, but it's very clear. There's only the sides and the base, the sides and the bits and pieces, and the handle. Put one there and one there. The sides or base and handle. That's it. Put them down. Where's the cup that's left? It's obvious that one is not true. It's obvious there's no cup there. It's obvious there's no independent cup. It's obvious there's no cup apart from the parts. It's clear. If you were, you'd find it. It'd be left. Oh, there's the cup. Wow. There's the owner. Oh, look, put its handle on, put its sides on. You understand? We're not complicated with a cup. Now, the other argument, more subtle, is it's not the cup is not this whole thing itself, all in itself. So why is that not true? Well, why, if it is true that that the sides and the handle are the same as cup, then why would you say my cup has a handle? That's 2 things. Why would you say that? If cup is synonymous with handle and cup is synonymous with sides, then you don't need to say my cup has handles and a side, because it means the same. It's like saying my cup has a cup. Handle has a handle. Handle has a cup. It's absurd. And that leads you naturally to the final one. Cup is empty of existing in and of itself, empty of existing from its own side, completely empty of that. But it's a dependent arising cup. And the subtlest dependent arising is merely labeled. But as Catherine said, and it sounds depressing, that's all there is, but it's not the meaning. That's what we have to, it's hard to hear, because we're too concrete in our thinking. And that's the other one, the two truths. For the yogi who's realized the emptiness of the cup, their cup still holds their tea and they'll get a nice drink out of it. You can't argue with that. You get so caught up intellectually, the dualism. Oh, well, there's no cup, there's nothing. Well, if there's nothing, you can't have a bloody cup of tea. Make up your mind. So it's not a question of there's no cup or no I. That's the way Buddha's saying it. It's a question of how it exists. And as Amazoba says, what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. I find that very tasty. It sort of gives you kind of a way into it. And so we think, well, what's the point of all this? What's the point of all this? What we don't realize is we suffer because we think there's an intrinsic cup. That's the joke, isn't it? We don't realize that. Not to mention the intrinsic I. So the four-point analysis is you first establish what you think the cup appears to be to you, which is hard to get. Then you search for it among the parts, and then you search for it. You discover that it's not oneness with the parts, it's not separate from the parts, and it's not oneness with the parts. And the conclusion is, therefore, there's no cup, and therefore, then you realize dependent arising. Not there's nothing. You don't fall into the abyss of the great mistake, because cup still functions. In the Heart Sutra, Buddha's telling us this. Buddha says, he's sitting there actually in meditation and he's channeling his thoughts into the minds of Avalokitesvara, the 10th level bodhisattva, and Shariputra. So Shariputra asks, how do you, the perfection of wisdom? And then the rest of it is Avalokitesvara giving the answer, but it's really Buddha channeling his thoughts into their minds, into their words. So he says, he takes the first of the 5 aggregates. Form is the first of the 5 components of a person. And he says, form is empty. And then he says, emptiness is form. Even just that first phrase, it's enough. So what he's saying is, so you can put cup there, you can put self there, any word you like. So let's put I there. Let's spell it out. He's saying I, which is, stop thinking when you say I, some special, like the way you're talking, the Vedantic. Don't think of it. We're just talking I here as the label given to a person. That's all it is. This is the name we're giving. It's the name of this phenomenon is called I. The name of that phenomenon is called microphone. The name of that phenomenon conventionally is called cushion. So just keep it light, I am empty of existing inherently. Then you tip that over and you say the emptiness of inherent existence is I. So what his meaning is that emptiness of inherent existence is a characteristic, is a knowable, is a concept, is a thing that does exist. That absence of inherent existence of the I, the absence of inherent existence of an I, exists right there on the I. So I is empty and emptiness is I. You can't have emptiness of inherent I without a conventional I. Not possible. There would just be nothingness if there's no conventional realities. So cup, once we establish it, cup, a tea holder, cup, is empty of inherent cupness, put it that way. And then in emptiness of inherent cupness, clearly, if you say those words, exists right where there's a cup. On, or as Amazoba puts it, the emptiness of the I exists right here on the aggregates. It's a characteristic. So emptiness of inherent existence is a characteristic of a conventional phenomenon. You've got to start with conventional first. Cup, toilets, people, cushions, noses, eyes, establish the existence of a phenomenon conventionally. You label it, you define it, you agree upon it, you shake hands, and now we can communicate. This is a crucial first step. Then on that, you then search for the inherent cup, the inherent I, the inherent this, the inherent that. Is it either oneness with or separate from? Whether it's this one or the cup, same argument. And you'll establish there can't be, and in fact doesn't need to be, a separate I. There doesn't need to be an owner. That, you see, philosophically, that's for the Buddha, that one philosophically is the same argument as there being no creator. The world, if you're a Muslim, you say the world is so amazing, there has to be an architect. Christians talk that way. The Buddha says we don't need creating. We don't need bossing. We don't need managing. All the individual beings of the universe create themselves. So the idea of a creator is literally dualism for the Buddha, completely. Even a subtle energy that's out there, intrinsic, not even God, whatever that is, that still is dualism, Buddha says. That's dualism. You don't need a creator. And individually doesn't need a boss in here called the soul. Because we say, I walk up the street. So we assume there's walking up the street and an I bossing. I am drinking tea. We assume there's a drinking of the tea and the I doing it. That's how we think. Completely dualistic. It's just names. It's just how we speak. It's just words. It's just language. It's a convenient way to talk. We give too much power to the word I, and the others too, because we think there's an intrinsic cup as well, an intrinsic drinking. It's just convenient language, spacious. Don't need a boss in here, and the world doesn't need a boss. That's a very shocking concept to Christians and Muslims. It's unbearable to hear that. It's like the worst, it's worse than being a communist. But it's dualism for the Buddha, pretty dualistic. We do fine causing our own happiness, and we can cause our own suffering. Both. We can do both. That's the point. We don't need running. We don't need managing. We don't need punishing. We don't need rewarding. All of that one of guilt and shame and drama is all rooted in this dualistic view of a separate I. You know, and then the craving to be seen and heard and rewarded and praised. All that's dualistic nonsense, you know. All coming from believing in the separate I, in the separate mummy, separate daddy, this out there. So both the philosophical view of a creator running the universe or a soul running the person, dualistic for the Buddha. Don't need. Sounds scary. It is scary, but he's discovered you don't need. Emptiness of intrinsic I is a characteristic of the conventional I. But as Lama Zopa says, when you realize that, it's as if there's no I. But conventionally there is an I, but when you realize that, it's so subtle, it's as if there is no I. Both of these. And they come together. They are the same. It's like they're you know, flip sides of the same coin. And only finally when you're omniscient, finally when you're a Buddha, do these two appear simultaneously, the two truths. The conventional and ultimate appear as one, you know, no contradiction. So anyway, people, we keep moving, keep practicing. And all the stuff we talked about leads to this, you know. This is the culmination of the path. Get the conventional stuff clear first, then we can do the ultimate. All right, so then, all right, people, food for thought, keep moving. All we can do, reading, thinking, analyzing, meditating. Don't get too stuck, but be clear. One step at a time, keep purifying. And then we think all these 2 days, we've been chatting away, 3 days, all of us listening, thinking, I'm listening too, analyzing, thinking, contemplating. All these seeds we've planted, be delighted. So we want to nourish, think we're going to nourish these seeds with our virtue, with our goodness, with our effort, with our practice, so that we can continue to grow on this path, because we are a work in progress. Be very happy and get wisdom and get compassion and become, you know, become enlightened. for our sake and the sake of others. Jangchub semcho grimpoche, make panam kegyuchig, ye panyam pa me payang, gong ne gong du habashok. Gewadi nyurudag, lama sange drugyone, drowa chikyang marupa, dei sada gapashok. No, I think we should do Lama Zopa Rinpoche's return prayer. This is the prayer that Dalai Lama gave us a couple of years ago to do for Lama Zopa, to create the cause for Rinpoche to come back quickly and continue teaching us. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Lozang, which is Tsongkhapa, our kind of lineage Lama, father and sons, along with lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience. That's Zopa means that. Zopa, his name, and that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. Such a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the oceans of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, it's all the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay. Well, that's it. We're done. Thank you, people. Thank you, darlings.